Hey, Paul Mack here. I've got another question from a viewer. This one is from Adam in Wisconsin. Adam writes, "Greetings. I've been loving your videos and you strike me as a wise, intelligent person." Adam, you're commenting on the right channel, right? We'll assume that you are. "I've been loving your videos and you strike me as a wise, intelligent person. I was wondering what 10 books were the greatest influence in your life that you would recommend. Any books at all, doesn't matter. Could be on farming, philosophy, theology, and so forth. What 10 would you grab if your home was on fire and you could only grab 10? Keep up the great work. Love your show. Thank you." Adam from Wisconsin. Well, we'll give this a try, Adam. Now, let me be clear. This list I'm going to give you is, as Adam asked, the top 10 most influential books on my life. Not necessarily my top 10 enjoyable books or my top 10 farm resource books. There might be some overlap. There probably is some overlap here. But these are my top 10 books that were most influential in my life personally. So, to start with, number 10, the 10th most important, most influential book in my life was a children's book by the title of The Boxcar Children. It was actually a set of books, and let me tell you this, when I was a kid, when I was pre-school age, in the summertime, our public library, we lived several miles outside of town, and our public library had what they called a bookmobile, and they would send this bookmobile out to the rural areas, and it was full of books, and you could check out. It was just like a library in your, showing up and parking in your front yard, and you could go in there and pick out books and check them out. And my mother would go in with me and help me pick out some books, and I was just enthralled by all these books in my front yard for a period of time, and I would look through and she would help me find some that she thought I would like. And this was one of the Boxcar Children. It's actually a series, and The Boxcar Children was one of the first books I remember her reading to me. And basically, it's hard for me. It's been a while since I've scanned through the pages, but basically it was several kids, for one reason or another, had to live in an abandoned boxcar on a section of railway out in the middle of nowhere, and they had to kind of fend for themselves. Raised a garden, and they cooked their own meals. And this was one of the first brushes as a child that I ever had with both self-reliance and resourcefulness, two themes that, especially later in life, just meant a great deal to me and still mean a great deal to me, even on the Farm Hands Companion show. And so that was my first experience with seeing kids, not adults, but kids who were very resourceful and, doing things so that they could live, so that they could eat, so that they could live in that abandoned boxcar. So parents, I highly recommend, especially you homeschoolers who are bringing up your kids and training them there at home, giving them an education, I highly recommend The Boxcar Children just for those themes of self-sufficiency and resourcefulness. And also, by the way, parents, public school kids or homeschool kids, parents, please read to your kids. It's one of the best things that you can do. You're spending time with them, and you're engaging with your children in this fascinating story. So read to your children. It's one of the best things that you can do for your children. And I recommend The Boxcar Children. The number 9 most influential book happens to be another children's book, and this is a pretty old book. It's called The Brementown Musicians, and it's an odd little story. These animals, these farm animals, are older farm animals, elderly, if you will, and they have surpassed their usefulness on the farm, and so they kind of set off, they run away from home, and they find each other. I think it was a dog, a cat, a donkey. What was that other one? Was it a rooster? Yeah, a rooster. And they all gang together, and they all want to be musicians because they can make wonderful noises, they think. And so they're headed toward the German town of Bremen because they're going to be musicians there, and life will be happy. All will be good. And so on their way, they have to spend the night in a little cabin somewhere out in the middle of the woods, and they encounter some outlaws who are in the cabin. And it kind of goes from there. I'm not going to give the story away. It's exciting for the kids. But I myself, it really inspired me to want to play an instrument. And so I'm a musician of sorts. The music that you hear on the Farmhands Companion show and the other shows that I do is music that I've recorded myself on instruments that for the most part, most all of them are instruments that I or my brother have made from scratch, and public domain songs, fiddle tunes that I found and arranged. So the Bremertown Musicians, I kind of credit that book with being what got me fascinated with music, making music. And also, with the animals having to stick together and survive and come up against these outlaws that are in this house, there's a bit of resourcefulness there. They have to band together and come up with a plan that works. So, number 9, the Bremertown Musicians. Your kids will love it. Read it to them. The 8th most influential book in my life is a theology book called The Attributes of God by Arthur W. Pink. Sometimes we make the mistake of making God out to be what we want him to be rather than looking at the Scriptures solely and letting the Scriptures, which is God's revelation of himself, tell us who he is. And A.W. Pink, in his book, The Attributes of God, does a very good job at outlining the characteristics of God and codifying those characteristics, his loving kindness, his mercy, his wrath even, his immutability, the fact that he does not change, his sovereignty over all things. Just a wonderful book that outlines the attributes of God, because what this country needs just about more than anything is a proper understanding of who God is. That would solve a lot of problems in our churches today. Number 7 is a farm book, one of those farm books that I have benefited so greatly from. This is actually an older edition of Reader's Digest Back to Basics, How to Learn and Enjoy Traditional American Skills. I don't remember when I came across this book. It's been years and years ago. I love this book. It's got all kinds of things in it. Crafts, how to make soap, even livestock, raising the different kinds of livestock, building a log cabin, different kinds of notches, making wood shingles, protecting your home with trees and earth, leading the water to the powerhouse, solar water systems, a simple design for year-round use, beekeeping, canning food, you name it. I could go on, but here it is, Back to Basics. It's sort of one of those, Bibles for homesteading, and it's just a good all-around primer for homesteading and small farming. A great resource to have around the house. Your kids will love it. It'll inspire them. Number 6, the 6th most influential book in my life is not a very large book, but a little book called All of Grace by Charles Haddon Spurgeon. This is more or less, obviously, Adam gave me carte blanche to talk about theology books that have influenced me, and certainly this is one of them. If you're not familiar with Charles Haddon Spurgeon, I highly suggest you familiarize yourself with him. He was a British preacher in London along about the time of our American Civil War, and very, very popular in England there. And he happened to be popular in the United States as well. Somebody would transcribe his sermons, and they were printed and were sold all over England and across the seas as well. And he became very popular in the United States. And case in point, my own grandmother, Paul Mac's wife, Nanny, she almost named my father Spurgeon. His middle name would have been Spurgeon. But instead, she chose, the letter L. I don't know. Spurgeon was a wonderful preacher, but a wonderful wordsmith. His sermons are concise, powerful, scriptural, to the point, but he had just such a beautiful way with words. Anyway, he was very well known and ought to be very well known even today. And this book, All of Grace, is a superb explanation of biblical salvation and how to be assured of everlasting life beyond this life. A great book, All of Grace, Charles Haddon Spurgeon. Number 5, another theology book called The Holiness of God. This one by a man named R.C. Sproul, who is more of a modern contemporary. He's now passed away. This is the book that God used to help give me a seriousness for the holiness of God. There's too much in many pulpits across America and across the world today. There's a lot of flippancy regarding God and a lot of assumptions about his character, and we need to maintain that holy respect for who he is and for his holiness. This book certainly helped me to do that. Yes, God is approachable, but we need to maintain that very serious respect for his character and who he is and his holiness. I was blessed one time to meet Dr. R.C. Sproul. He was doing a sort of a seminar type thing in Memphis, Tennessee, and I took off that day and then the weekend to go hear those some of those lectures, and I got to meet him, and he actually signed my book, I think. Looky there, R.C. Sproul. So I don't loan this one out just a whole lot. You might not get it back. Other than being a great biblical scholar of our time, R.C. did a real mean impersonation of Detective Columbo, for whatever that's worth. It's pretty funny. I enjoyed it. The fourth most influential book in my life is a book called Desiring God. I told you I was at the seminar with R.C. Sproul, the writer of The Holiness of God, and I went there to see R.C. I'd heard him on the radio for a number of years, and there was another guy there with him that I didn't know. And after hearing some of his lectures, I was fascinated by his delivery and his eloquence and his ability to properly talk about scriptures and speak on scriptures. And basically, he was it was John Piper, who's somewhat more well known today, and he was basically given a seminar on his principle found in the book Desiring God, which basically, in a nutshell, is if God is the best thing for us, then we should help ourselves to all there is of him and indulge ourselves in the worship of the one true God. So a wonderful, wonderful book on theology by John Piper, Desiring God. The third most influential book in my life is a book by one of my favorite historian heroes, and that is Roy Underhill. You've probably seen Roy Underhill on PBS. Roy was actually the first master housewright at Colonial Williamsburg. And although this is one of my very favorite Roy Underhill books, it is not the book I'm talking about right now. My favorite book from Roy Underhill, one of the most influential books in my life, is a rather obscure book that Roy wrote called Cru Jeffs Shoe. The subtitle, And Other Ways to Captivate an Audience of 1 to 1,000. Now, in that book, Roy gives away his secrets for inspiring, entertaining, and educating an audience live. He had a good deal of experience in live presentations and woodworking. You've seen him do it on his show, but he honed his craft for years doing it live in front of people at Colonial Williamsburg and other places. And so what better man to get advice on how to speak to people and how to educate them and inspire them and to be entertaining all at the same time. So Cru Jeffs Shoe, and Other Ways to Captivate an Audience of 1 to 1,000 is a wonderful book, a field guide for educators, teachers, trainers, presenters, or anybody who wants to speak more effectively, public speaking. So Cru Jeffs Shoe. A few years ago, I loaned it out to somebody and I never saw it again. If you're that person, could you give me my book back? Number 2, the second most influential book in my life, or I guess I should say series, is the Foxfire book, or the Foxfire Series. I've talked about them on another previous question and answer show, but this was the original, the Foxfire book. There are, I can't even tell you how many Foxfire books there are now in the series. They're all worth having. The best ones are probably, as far as learning how to do old-fashioned things, numbers 1 through 5. Number 9 is good. They're all good. They're all worth having. There's even a Foxfire cookbook and other resources. So, but yeah, let's see. It was like, I think I was young, married. We didn't have kids yet. We were on vacation at my father-in-law's cabin in western North Carolina. My wife dragged me to a used bookstore, and there I found the 3-volume set. The first 3 were in a box, and she bought it for me. Took it back to the cabin, started reading it there on vacation, and could not put them down. As I told you about in another video, this series was developed by a high school English teacher, Elliot Wigington, who told his hillbilly students to go out. This was in the 60s. He told them to go out and interview their relatives, their neighbors, and grandparents and great-grandparents, and ask them how they did certain mountain things in the Appalachian Mountains. And so they came back armed with all this footage, this film, photos and tape recordings and written notes of how people did things, and they recorded them in this. So what was a high school assignment became one of the greatest publications, one of the most useful, as far as I'm concerned, publications that this nation has ever seen. The Foxfire Series, Foxfire book. Last but never least, most influential book in my life is the Bible, God's holy word. Harmonious with itself, contains God's revelations about himself, and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. But particularly my Bible. This Bible is special to me because I have in the margins written things, and when the Lord would teach me something or I would find something profound, I might write a little note out in the margin. And most of the time, if you'll read something that's confusing to you, there's another verse somewhere that'll make that confusing verse a little more clear. And so I would write that verse that helped me in the margin here, and then where the other verse is, I would write this verse there. And so your own Bible sort of becomes your own chain reference. And here's the thing. What a wonderful gift to be able to pass down to your children, to your grandchildren, to your great-grandchildren, to have a family Bible to where you can look back and see what your great-great-grandfather, your great-great-grandmother had to say about what the Lord was teaching them through Scripture. I wish that my ancestors had written in their Bible so that I could see their thoughts, so that I could see what the Lord was teaching them. Not only is it a help for you to be able to write in your Bible, but it is a wonderful gift a legacy to leave to your posterity on earth so that they can see what the Lord has taught you. So, the number 1 most influential book in my life, God's Word, the Bible. If you have read any or all of these books and you'd like to comment on what they've meant to you as well, or maybe you have your own favorite book that you'd like to tell others about, leave that in the comment section. That'll be great reading for all of us to go back and see what everybody has put there and some of your most influential books in your own life. It'll be a help to everybody. If you have a question, as always, if you have a question about any other farm-related thing, leave that in the comment section below. And I'm Paul Mack. Until next time, I'll talk at you later. Jeb, J1, you'll be hearing from my attorney regarding refunding my 5 minutes and 57 seconds. You almost made me think you were really looking for a training video on how to skid a log. Wait a minute, are you serious?